University in 1955, and in 1956 he joined the Harvard faculty, and now after 50 years of service to Harvard, he is Pellegrino University Professor Emeritus. Edward Wilson is regarded as one of the world's foremost scientists. He invented the theory of island biogeography with Robert MacArthur. He decoded the chemical communication of ants. He formulated the theory of pheromone evolution with Bill Bossart, who is also here at Harvard, and he founded the field of sociobiology. Recently, he is very influential in conservation of biodiversity. Professor Wilson has written 22 books and more than 400 papers. 2 of his books on human nature and the ants won the Pulitzer Prize. Professor Wilson has honorary degrees from Harvard University and 35 other universities. He has received more than 100 awards, including the Crawford Prize of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, the Japan Prize, and the National Medal of Science. In 1995, Wilson was named one of the 25 most influential Americans by Time magazine. In 2005, Foreign Policy named him one of the world's 100 leading intellectuals. In 2006, he published 3 new books, and therefore we can all witness that his productivity is a continuously increasing function of time.
Thank you so much, Martin, and certainly it's a very special honor and a special occasion to be here at this Divinity School to speak on the subject that I have chosen tonight. I'm going to start by suggesting a new way to abate the culture wars between science and religion, including the most contentious issue of evolution. It's a way that calls for truce between scientific materialists and religious believers in order to form an alliance on behalf of the living environment. I'll then present a brief account of what we know about diversity in the living world and why the efforts to explore and save biological diversity is destined to become an increasingly large part of science and the teaching of science in the years to come. First then, something of a surprise for some of you in style. Let me move this out of the way so I seem to be punching this involuntarily. We'll get that back there. Okay. I'll begin with an appeal to the vast American religious community in the form of a letter to an imaginary Southern Baptist pastor taken from my book, The Creation. This is, for the English majors here present, an apostrophic letter. Okay. In this extended essay, I express the belief shared by at least some of the evangelicals on whom I focus, and I think perhaps most, that science and religion joined in an alliance for this transcendent purpose can save the creation. That is, save life in the natural world. The pastor stands in for all religious believers. On behalf of science, I will be so bold as to offer the hand of friendship to all. This is the letter. Dear Pastor, we have not yet met, yet I feel I know you well enough to call you friend. First of all, we grew up in the same faith. As a boy in Alabama and Florida, I too answered the altar call. I went under the water. Although I no longer belong to that faith, I'm confident that if we met and spoke privately of our deepest beliefs, it would be in a spirit of mutual respect and goodwill. I know that we share many precepts of moral behavior. I write to you now for your counsel and help. Of course, in doing so, I see no way to avoid the fundamental difference in our respective worldviews. You're a strict interpreter of Christian Holy Scripture. I am a secular humanist. For you, the glory of an unseen divinity. For me, the glory of the universe revealed at last. For you, the belief in God made flesh to save mankind. For me, the belief in Promethean fire seized to set men free. You found your final truth. I'm still searching. I may be wrong. You may be wrong. We may both be partly right. Does this difference in worldview separate us in all things? It does not. You and I and every other human being strive for the same imperatives of security, freedom of choice, personal dignity, and a cause to believe in larger than ourselves. Let's see then, if we can, and if you're willing, to meet on the near side of metaphysics and declare a truce in the culture wars in order to deal with the real world we share. I put it this way because you have the power to help solve a great problem about which I care deeply. I hope you have the same concern. I suggest that we set aside our differences in order to save the creation. The defense of living nature is a universal value. It doesn't rise from, nor does it promote any religious or ideological dogma. Rather, it serves without discrimination the interest of all humanity. Pastor, we need your help. The creation, living nature, is in deep trouble. Scientists estimate that if habitat conversion and other destructive human activities continue at their present rates, half the species of plants and animals on Earth could be either gone or at least fated for early extinction by the end of the century. A full quarter will drop to this level during the next half century as a result of climate change alone. Surely we can agree that each species, however inconspicuous and humble it may seem to us at this moment, is a masterpiece of biology and well worth saving. Each species possesses a unique combination of genetic traits that fits it more or less precisely to a particular part of the environment. But prudence alone dictates that we act quickly to prevent the extinction of species, and with it the pauperization of Earth ecosystems, hence of the creation. You may well ask at this point, why me? Because religion and science are the two most powerful social forces in the world today, including especially the United States. If religion and science could be united on the common ground of biological conservation, the problem would soon be solved. If there is any moral precept shared by people of all beliefs, it is that we owe ourselves and future generations a beautiful, rich, and healthful environment. So now, having spoken to the pastor, let me fill you in as the biologist rather than the wannabe Baptist preacher. Some of the basic facts and background. Our relation to the rest of life can be put in a nutshell as follows. Scientists in just the last several decades, using new technologies and a new intensity of effort, have found that the biosphere, that razor-thin membrane of life plastered onto the surface of the Earth, so thin that seen from the side from a shuttle, space shuttle, it cannot be seen. You cannot see it if you look at it from the side. I know, I asked an astronaut. We found it in richer than diversity than ever before conceived. Biodiversity, which took about 3.5 billion years to evolve, is being eroded at an accelerating rate by human activity. The loss is going to inflict a heavy price in wealth, security, and spirit unless it is abated, and we start right now. Altogether, the 21st century is destined, in my opinion, to be the century of the environment. The immediate future is usefully conceived as a bottleneck of still rapid population growth and high per capita consumption. Science and technology, combined with a lack of self-understanding and a Paleolithic obstinacy that led to our ruinous practices, have brought us to where we and the world are today. Now science and technology, combined with foresight and moral courage, both based on a more enlightened ethic, must see us through this bottleneck and out, one hopes, by the end of the century. Now, there is one redeeming feature that gives us an advantage of human nature that suggests that we can make the century a bottleneck and not a dreadful descent into chaos and ruin. It is simply that when women gain some amount of freedom and financial independence and can make important decisions on their own, the birth rate plummets. Now, this is not your typical liberal Harvard art professor speaking to you. I am speaking of well-established demographic facts from the United Nations displayed here. In all of the industrialized countries, the so-called developed world, the industrialized world, the fertility rate, the average number of children produced per woman, has dropped below the break point of 2.1 children per woman, except for the United States. And even there, we're kept aloft by the non-immigrant population that will undoubtedly follow suit as it is assimilated. The trend is global. It includes even Africa, as you can see here, the poorest continent. Globally, the fertility rate has dropped from 6 to 3 children in the past 40 years, and the United Nations population analysts predict that the number of people in the world will peak at very roughly 9 billion, give or take a billion on the outside, at about the end of the century. And then it will begin to descend. That's about 40% more people than live on the earth today. Now, it's going to be uncomfortable, but it can be managed. The longest lasting effect of the bottleneck, and the subject of my presentation today, is the accelerating destruction of the natural environment, leading to the irreversible mass extinction of ecosystems and species. The damage already done cannot be repaired within any period of time that has meaning for the human mind. The more it is allowed to grow, the more future generations will suffer for it in ways both well understood now and still unimagined. And you must not think, as you surely are thinking as you sit there, that it's all right. This has always been the way of the natural world. Species go extinct, new species are born. There's always a cycle. Most species that have ever lived are extinct. Yes, but think of the time scale. Before the coming of humanity, before we began these destructive practices, the rate of extinction of species was, and this is in between the big mass extinction rates which happened very roughly, not periodically, but very approximately, 100 million years apart. The last one 65 million years ago that ended the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs. In between those very widely spaced great events, the extinction rate has been very roughly about one species extinct per million species per year. And the rate of birth of new species in the speciation process has been about that. One new species appearing per million years, per million species per year. And the coming of humanity has seen the rise of the extinction rate by, we estimate very conservatively, 100, order of magnitude 100 times. I think almost surely it's now 1,000 times higher than that. And I would invite you to think, too, that the birth rate is dropping because we're destroying the nurseries, the natural environment where species originate. So you can easily imagine in your mind what an expenditure 1,000 times higher than your income can do to the bank account. And we are losing Earth's biological bank account, and it has taken, after the great extinction spasms that have occurred, there have been 5 others in the last 450 million years, it has taken roughly about 5 million years for natural selection and species creation to replace what was lost in those catastrophic events like the giant meteorite strikes. The radical reduction, then, of the world's biodiversity is the folly our descendants will least likely forgive us. Let me now review some of the basic and rather amazing facts about biological diversity, or biodiversity in short. All of this will be on the final exam. Okay. Here we have a representation of what biodiversity is. It's the totality of all the inherited variation of life on Earth. And that would sound to be trivial, except that we divide it into 3 levels, illustrated in this Australian figure. 2 of the levels are shown here. Levels of biological organization, and the top level is the ecosystems, which are the marshlands, the shallow marine, the rainforest, grassland, ponds, rivers, so on. And the next level down are the species that compose the ecosystems, and I've shown here, they have shown, an array of such species from the large at the top down to the very minute. Not shown is the 3rd most basic level of biodiversity, and that is the variety of genes that prescribe the species. But basically what we do is study biodiversity at the species level. And I have just walked away from an organization meeting on that is part of a movement to start the exploration of this earth. It's called the Encyclopedia of Life Initiative, to explore this planet, to find out precisely what has happened, so we won't be flying blind as we go through this century with reference to what we are doing. That then brings me to how many species are there? I did this 20 years ago. I put together the data for this 20 years ago, and at that time it appeared that scientists, biologists, systematists like the ones at the Museum of Comparative Zoology and our University Herbarium here work on, they had described about 1.4 million species and given them a scientific name. Now that figure is roughly about 1.8. We don't know exactly. We don't know much of anything. We don't even know how many species exactly have been described by science, but it's about 1.8 million. But we do not know to the order of magnitude how many species are really there on the planet, here on the planet. It could be as low as 10 million. That's highly unlikely. It could be as high as 100 million. We don't know. All we know is that most of the planet, life on planet Earth is unknown. Now, if that sounds like hyperbole, it is not, and I will illustrate why it is not. Consider fungi, rust, molds, mushrooms, lichen symbionts, and so on. They are a major support for our life systems everywhere in the world. 60,000 species, approximately 60,000, have been discovered and described. Specialists have estimated that there are actually in excess of 1.5 million species of fungi. For those of you who are thinking about a career in biology, I say go into mycology, young woman. And here is an entire career of exploration of great benefit to humanity. But they are dwarfed by the nematodes. The nematodes of the world, the roundworms, inconspicuous, wriggly little things that you can see by scooping up a handful of soil and using a magnifying glass, and you can see the tiny white worms that are there, are the most abundant animals on Earth. 4 out of every 5 animals are nematode worms. It's been said that if all solid matter were removed off the surface of the earth except for the nematode worms, you could still see the ghostly outline of it in nematode worms. Now I have to ask you, what are they doing? We know that they are essential for the maintenance of ecosystems. We don't know enough about them to even say why. The vast majority of species, we have no idea what they're doing. The ones that have been studied intensively, we know that they are beautifully adapted to particular parts of the environment. We know that these species lock together with many others in food webs and other interactive processes to varying degrees according to species that really provide the stability and sustainability of these ecosystems, but we don't know why. How could we know if we do not know what they are? Our ignorance of ecology is profoundly deep, and now let me proceed to the dark matter of biodiversity, the bacteria. The bacteria, in 2002, the last time I got a figure out of the literature, 5,688 species of bacteria had been discovered and described. There are that many bacteria, somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 species, in 1 gram of soil, of rich soil. Pick up a spoonful or two of loose soil and hold it in your hand, and there you are holding about 10 billion bacteria, representing somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000 species of organism. And it's been estimated recently that a ton of soil contains in the vicinity of 4 million species. All of them, you might as well say, unknown to science. They certainly are at the base of our ecosystems and our living world and ourselves, our own lives, and we know almost nothing about them. Microbial ecology, microbial systematics and biodiversity, there is the land for the molecular biologists to go forth and help systematists explore. We are now at the level of being able to do this for the first time. We're right at the breakthrough of being able to identify whole bacterial species, not just looking for genes, looking for what's called environmental RNA and so on, but actually start identifying the species and go down and see the bacterial community and identify the species the way you would go out in the woods with a pair of binoculars and identify the birds. Close. It's possible now to identify or to decode a bacterium, to get all of the, to sequence all of the DNA of a bacterium in under 4 hours, and that's dropping fast. So it's going, this is a whole new area, a whole domain of biology opening up microbial ecology. So let me salute the bacteria. Well, I'm going past this. Oh, nematode worms. I should have shown you those. If you get tired of bird watching, take along a microscope and a trowel and a petri dish and see an amazing world. Here they are, the bacteria. Most of those, all except for the spirochete down in the lower left-hand cover, are from your gut. Surely you know, our lives depend upon the symbioses of almost countless numbers of species and countless individuals with bacteria, do you not? Some of you certainly have taken Culturelle to get it back to normal. And the latest estimate of the number of bacteria species that live in the human mouth and throat and probably are essential to the balance, to protect the mouth against alien bacteria, over 700 species now known to live in the human mouth and so on. But now I should mention, I cannot finish this presentation without mentioning Pleurococcus, a bacterium, a photosynthetic bacterium, which was not discovered until 1989 and includes probably the smallest organisms in the world or close to it, but also the most abundant in the open sea. No one had ever seen them before, but they're too small to see with an ordinary microscope. Now they're discovered, and now we're learning about them, and we figure that not only are they the most abundant organisms in the sea and possibly on Earth, but they create a great deal of the matter. They do a great deal of the photosynthetic work in the open sea. So much for understanding the ecology of the world. But let me tell you that the bacteria fade to minority status before the viruses. No one has figured out how to distinguish species of virus, and the study of viruses is just in the wild is just as primitive as, or more so than the study of bacteria. But an estimate has been made that so diverse are the bacteria of the viruses, then they contain more kinds of genes than all the remainder of life put together. And they are not just disease-causing organisms, but they are also include huge numbers of so-called gene weavers, the prophages that are incorporated in and used by bacteria to speed and alter their own evolution. The three domains of life are just beginning to become apparent to us. We belong to the eukarya. We are a crown group of gigantic organisms. And we now know that what we thought was just highly variable bacteria and are really two domains, that is, multiple phyla of life on Earth. And only now are we beginning to explore a few of the archaea. I'm going to get right up to the edge of science fiction and suggest that since we've only become recently aware of an entire domain of life, and because we only know an infinitesimal fraction of the kinds of bacteria and archaea on Earth, that if there were, in early stages in the evolution of life, this suggestion made by serious scientists like Francis Crick, that life may have started from propagules of highly resistant forms that drift through space, then we may find some of the remnants of alien life at the level of these two great domains. There may be aliens among us. Are you listening, Hollywood? So this is just one of the many excitements waiting, just that remote possibility of waiting. The new biological explorers beginning to map life on Earth. The genes, I won't dwell on them too long. This is the complete genetic code of a virus, about 1,000 letters, and this is the one part in 2,500 of the DNA of a human being taken from a diploid cell, and you would have to have, you can see the DNA if you're up close, the actual molecule. You would have to have 2,500 such panels to fully encompass the human DNA, and we're just typical. Nothing unusual about us in the amount of the genetic code. Just to give you a feeling for how immense the genetic information is in these organisms, ourselves included, but, other things, spiders, flea hoppers, so on. Take the DNA out from a human cell, put the 4 strands end on end, and you have a real molecule, a molecule in real space about 1 meter long. You cannot see it because it is only 2 billionths of a meter across. It's quite invisible. 2 nanometers across. Magically enlarge it until you can see it. It's the size of a piece of shopping string, of wrapping string. And now ask yourself, having enlarged it to the extent where you can see it, how long would the 4 strands be? They would be I'll say it quickly. About 1,820 miles long, the distance from Dallas to New York, and as you walked it from Dallas to New York, you would be reading off 100 letters, base pairs, genetic letters every inch. That's what you have that's built up in evolution to create these organisms, and a great deal of that is what we lose when we let one species go extinct. An ensemble that takes thousands, and in some cases millions of years, has taken that long to create. Where is biodiversity located? Everywhere there is liquid water, or the potential of liquid water, pole to pole, from the summit of Mount Everest to the Challenger Deep at 36,000 feet below the ocean's surface. At the very least, wherever you go, there are bacteria and other microorganisms, including microscopic fungi. Some are to be found thriving in water above the boiling point and thermal vents on the seafloor, and super cool water in the Arctic sea ice, and living at the pH of carbolic acid and mine outflows. These are the so-called extreme extremophiles, and we now know that there are quite a few of them, especially among the archaea, but among the bacteria too. And this is the reason why we give some credence to at least thinking about plankton, nano measure plankton in space. When I was on the board of basic biology of NASA at one point, I said, "Why aren't you out there trawling? There may be real surprises awaiting biology if you did." Well, then there are the slimes. Now, this is a remarkable discovery made about Earth's biodiversity. Slimes that's an acronym for subterranean lithoautotrophic microbial ecosystems, and that will be on the exam. But these are organisms. They are bacteria and microscopic fungi, which you start to encounter well below the surface of the soil on down, and they go on down 2 miles, and they are completely independent. Huge mass of these organisms, maybe heavier, larger biomass than all the organisms above. They are completely independent because they live on chemical energy, hence lithoautotrophic. They live off what they have down there and continue, so that even if we were to burn the surface to a crisp, very likely you would have life continue in the slimes. And that's one reason why astrobiologists continue to press the argument that maybe we should now start drilling operations on Mars and Europa, and also because of the extremophile phenomenon, pick up some scrapings from the great volcanic outflows of Enceladus, the moon of Saturn. On Earth, most of the species of organisms are found in the tropical rainforest, plants and animals, even though the tropical rainforest, shown here in black, only cover about 6% of the Earth's surface. Down, I might add, 1/2, roughly, from what it was before Homo sapiens came along. This great domain ecosystem is, of course, as you might imagine, just in an early stage of exploration. And furthermore, one of the most exciting parts of it is where most of the photosynthesis occurs, and that's in the canopy. And athletic young men and women are on their way up there. It's hard to get up there because the tree trunks are so smooth, they're difficult. They have spines, many of them, and it's really difficult to get to those upper branches, that some of which are almost horizontal and carry great epiphytic gardens of gesneriads and orchids and bromeliads and even cacti, swarming with stinging ants and wasps. Tarzan would not have lasted, 15 minutes. And here we have what one of Harvard's graduate students used to get up there by firing a lead arrow up and over with a bow, pulling the rope down and then going up by rope climbing activities. This looks dangerous, and it is dangerous, but that's what graduate students are for. No, that could quickly turn into a very bad joke, and I would only tell it if I stopped telling it abruptly if anybody got hurt. But I think that we're moving to a safer technology, and I'll mention that in just a. But first, let me just give you one other remarkable shot of what it can be like when you get to the canopy of the forest. This young lady who is crawling out is on her way out to dense canopy that is a world unto itself. And from this was the Smithsonian fumigated from this one tree canopy in Peru. I identified 42 species of ants living there, that one canopy. And that's approximately equal to the number of species of ants found in the entire British Isles. That's why we can't keep our hands off the tropical rainforest. I mean, if you're interested in biodiversity, it's just a great adventure to go. Now this is the alternative technique. And there you see the investigator hanging at the end. Now, we don't put them to let them hang, but we put them in a gondola. Here's the pilot crane out in the Panama rainforest, and here is the gondola that they travel in. And that gondola can be moved around. It can move up and down. It can go back and forth along the arm of the crane. And I've been up in one. Believe me, that's heaven. When I go to that great rainforest in the sky, this is what I want to do. Just float around, day after day, year after year, to endless rainforest, going beyond the horizon, and the crane comes along. Never mind, it's getting late in the afternoon. And here are two investigators, two of our graduate students, looking at where the photosynthesis occurs, which is the unexplored part because it's in the outer branches. You can't reach any other way. And I would remind anyone that you can do equally innovative research on biodiversity and discover countless new species, providing you go down to the small organisms in temperate forests as well. They are not just flat, two-dimensional pans of decaying leaves, but an entire ecosystem. When you get down to that level, as you descend from the surface, you see millimeter by millimeter changes in the light and the humidity and the space available and the decay, the degree of decay. You have species that are specialized for each level in these microcosms. And this is the substance of the field of soil biology, and it's intimately connected with the study of biodiversity, and we're just beginning to get into that with these countless creatures. You can spend a lifetime in a Magellanic voyage of research around one tree stump and win tenure at 5 universities by just this, making important original discoveries, if you're willing to look at the little things that run the world, as I like to put it. And it's also a lifetime occupation to be a naturalist, a scientific naturalist with fundamental interest in this kind of science, as illustrated by myself at 13 years of age next to our house in a vacant lot in Mobile, Alabama, where I discovered at 13 the first colony of imported fire ant known from the United States. That was my first scientific discovery. Now I'll show you me 50 years later in Costa Rica. I still go out. When I go out on hands and knees, and it's just an activity I cannot give up. And I've even gone out with colleagues in the last couple of years, going into the mountains of Dominican Republic, where we do the first exploration in places never visited by specialists on ants and discover one species of ant after another. But all of this, as you know, is under threat. This is the scene of destruction that is so typical. This is the falling or the severe condition of the Atlantic forest of Brazil, one of the great magnificent rainforests of the world. That's being brought to a halt, but not before. A lot of it was burned. This is a picture of seen by the U.S. Weather Satellite Study System, showing how the world looks at night, and you can see the fires burning in the Amazon, fires burning in the Congo, up to the Sahel of grasslands under the Sahara, and around the world it's 5% of the Earth's surface is being burned every year. And when you take down the area of a forest or constrict the area of a lake or cut off part of the tributaries of a river, you're cutting area. And just as you see it in natural conditions, in descending islands of descending size in the West Indies, the number of species drops off in a very regular way, as it does in this demonstration of the decline of the numbers of species of reptiles and of amphibians, frogs, with the decline of the size of the island, of the space left available. And of course, this is natural here, but as we cut back the size of the habitats, you get the same decline, and it's about roughly the fourth root of the area you decline. So that when you lose 90% of the area of your available natural environment, you are 90%. You go to 10% of what it was. You are going now to have sustainable area roughly for only about 50% of the original fauna and flora, numbers of species. And this is true of real islands. It's also true of what we call habitat islands, or from the third down, for example. Lakes are but islands for aquatic creatures in a sea of land. And now I'm going to show you the destruction, pardon me, of the magnificent Philippine rainforest over 100 years. And this is typical. It's not an unusual case. Keep your eye, if you will, on the upper right-hand corner and also on the extent of green, the forest, as it was in 1900, and I'm going to run through to near the present time. Going, almost gone. And the destruction of the Atlantic rainforest, this is Darwin's forest that he exults over in his diaries as just the most magnificent thing he had ever seen to that time. The great forests of the Atlantic, almost gone, but down well below 10%. And here we will consider briefly the causes of extinction with the letters hippo, like the animal, and that's an acronym. H is the most destructive, represents the most destructive for habitat destruction, including by climate change. I is for invasive species, alien species that push out the original. The first P for pollution. The second P for overpopulation. Human overpopulation is a root cause. And O for overharvesting, that is extinguishing by excessive fishing and hunting. And I've used this example, this is the golden frog of Panama, which is now just about extinct in the wild. And we now know why it went to extinction, or near extinction, because of this is a disease, the chytrid fungus that was introduced by us, because of the reduction of its habitat by cutting of the Central American forest, and by it's a beautiful frog. It's been poached and overhunted by people for the terraria, and now it's gone, almost virtually gone. About 5,800 species of amphibians, mostly frogs, known in 2006, either present or gone. Approximately 100 became extinct since 1980. 1/3 of all of the species of frogs in the world are threatened by human activity. And moving quickly so that I will not run over my time, I'm going to just mention the fire ant that I grew up with and have studied all my life, from that one colony I found and some others that were still in the city, limited to the city of Mobile. It has spread through the South, from the Carolinas to Texas, hopped over to California, hopped over to China, to New Zealand, and is spreading has spread through Florida. It's hopped to the West Indies, has reached Northern and South America, and if it keeps on going down, it'll be really interesting for these fire ants then to meet their forebears, where they came from, which is near the River Plate, in the Pantanal region of southern Brazil. But in the course of which they certainly have changed the environment. This snake has eliminated, which was introduced, this is the brown tree snake on Guam, which eliminated after it was introduced either from the Solomon Islands or New Guinea. It was a specialist on feeding on nestling birds, and it ate them all. It ate all the birds of Guam, all of the land birds, all of them, including 3 species known nowhere else. Let me just show you now the faces of the departed and those that are hanging on, highly endangered, because it is human nature to identify with and care about individual species. And the more they know, the more they care. So let me just give you a gallery of those that are gone and we must protect, or that if they have not gone. The Cerulean paradise flycatcher, the Philippines is thought to be extinct, but one tiny population has now been found on one island in the Palawan chain. And maybe we'll be able to hang on to that. The orang. The orangs in Borneo, just in the last decade or so, their population has dropped from 100 to about 55,000 because of the clearing of the forest there. The ivory-billed woodpecker, is it extinct or has it been rediscovered? The Arkansas example has been challenged, and we haven't found it again in that swamp, in that floodplain forest. But there are now very promising reports of multiple ivory bills in the Choctawhatchee River forest floodplain of the Panhandle of Florida. Stay tuned. The golden toad of Panama, extinct. The striped snails, tree snails of Polynesia, extinct completely in French Polynesia, half of them gone in Hawaii, and the other half endangered. The plants of Hawaii, represented here by the ahina, the silver sword, large numbers of species down to extremely endangered, some surviving only as a single plant. And the birds down from an estimated 150 or so when the Hawaiians first set shore around 400 AD, from a magnificent fauna of eagles and ibises and giant goose-like birds to only about 25 bird species left today, almost all of them endangered. And what are we to do about this? The people in conservation biology and conservation organization and inspired workers in government organizations, rangers, wildlife specialists, and so on, have been working furiously to figure out how to save the Earth's biodiversity. And I could spend the rest of the evening explaining some of the things that are being done, and you are being very thankful. I have not suggested doing that. But I will just mention one thing in passing, and that is that one of the most promising aspects of the current extinction process is that most of the species that are endangered are located in a really small area of, this is on the land where we have the data, or in a relatively long area, small area, only 2.3% of the Earth's surface. And in that area, live approximately 50% of all the known, 2.3%, 50% of all the known plants, species, and 42% of all of the land vertebrates, mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. Now, if we could save those, and we have the methods known, we have the methods to do this, and it involves economics, sociology, anthropology, the whole 9 yards have to be considered to improve the lives of the people where these hotspots are so that they become stewards. It's to their advantage to do it. How much would it cost? Well, one estimate made several years ago, there's 34 hotspots. 24 of those that were analyzed at the time, by about 6-7 years ago, came up with an estimate. This was under the auspices of the Conservation International, that to save those and to save core areas in the 3 remaining tropical wilderness, forest wildernesses, Amazon, Congo, New Guinea, would require a single payment. Can come from all in, any countries in the world. A single payment of, at that time, $28 billion. That's a B. Now that is about, at the time, and I think probably it's up now at 50 billion, but that is about 1 part in 1,000 of the annual world domestic product. That is the combined domestic product of all the countries in the world. 1 part in 1,000. Trust me when I tell you that to save the rest of the world is cheap. It's just a matter of getting to move on this. In concluding, the central problem of the new century, in my opinion, and the one that's really going to count long term when future generations evaluate what on earth we were doing when we were messing around with all these things that make the front page of the New York Times. The central problem is how to raise the poor to an endurable quality of life while preserving as much of the natural world as possible. What is the connection? Both the poor and biological diversity are concentrated in the developing countries. The solution to the problem has to flow from the recognition that both depend on the other. Each depends on the other. The poor, especially the nearly 1 billion that are absolutely destitute by United Nations standards, unable to feed themselves, no sanitation, no clean water, high infant mortality. They have little chance to improve their lives in a devastated environment. They're in a poverty trap. Conversely, the natural environments where most of biodiversity hangs on cannot survive the press of land-hungry people in these special places who have nowhere else to go. So I hope that in this brief time I've been privileged to be with this potent group, that I've added to the conviction that is shared by growing numbers of thoughtful people in all walks of life, and I can report to you that now includes an increasing numbers of evangelicals and other religious leaders, that this is a problem that can be solved. The resources to do it, to solve it, exist. Those who have control over them have a lot of reasons to achieve that goal, not the least their own security. The technology exists, the cost is not high, and the benefits are beyond calculation. At the end of the day, however, the direction we take will be an ethical decision. It's going to have a religious intensity. A civilization able to envision God and an afterlife and to embark on the colonization of space, a notably stupid idea, but there you go, will surely find the way to save the integrity of this magnificent planet and the life it harbors, because it is the right thing to do, and an ennobling task for our species, the whole species. So I'll close with a statement attributed to the late John Sawhill, president of the Nature Conservancy, and my friend. John said, "A society is defined not just by what it creates, but by what it refuses to destroy," and I thank you for coming here and letting me speak. Do you want to take 5 minutes for questions?
Professor Wilson is happy to take some questions.
I know one question that would be on your mind is, with the book, The Creation, out, what has been the response? You know, the one I read to you? The response has been wonderful. The volume of mail I've gotten is very large, and it's increasing all the time. And the response is very warm, very positive. I have invitations to speak. I have invitations to meet with religious groups, mostly evangelical, because that's what I was dealing with. But I was using the New York effect, which is if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. But also because I knew a lot about evangelicals, and I had a sense that they were ready to make this. They just never had a known scientist and secularists hold out the hand of friendship. And when that happened, I know from talking with them, they were just relieved to think that they actually could work with the secularists, what they call it was the left, the anti-religious left. And a lot of reasons for them to think that it's anti-religious. But this led then to an initiative by Eric Shivian of the Harvard Medical School and Center for Health and the Global Environment, and his friend, Richard Cizik, the Vice President for Government Affairs of the National Association of Evangelicals, to suggest a meeting, and I met with them in the Cosmos Club, and we proposed a retreat with evangelical leaders and scientists, secularists, and environmentalists. And we held that retreat, about a dozen on either side. And the result of it was friendships formed and the agreement to create a covenant, which was then released at a press conference about 3 weeks ago at the National Press Club. And this now is leading to further initiatives broadening to other interested denominations and to other scientists and environmentalists and so on. I'm often asked, why bring the evangelicals into this? Let me give you 2 figures. The 2, or maybe it's the 3 leading secular humanist organizations in the United States, including the American Association of Humanists. They have a total membership of about 5,000. The American Association of Evangelicals, which is it's the largest, but it's just one of the organized groups of evangelicals, never mind the other religions and other denominations. In their 42,000 affiliated churches have 30 million members. Now, if we don't pay attention to those figures alone, we are Struthrius. That is ostrich-like. That's what kind of knowledge you get from zoology. Okay. Anyway, yes.
The question is twofold. Are new species currently still being created in natural environment? If so, are they all microorganisms? Am I right to assume that to create a new species of higher organism, the possibility is vanishing more? That's for one. And 2, can you just outline the criteria for new species and suggest a way to find them?
I think the question, if I got that right, is that if we create new species, if we decide to create new species for the ones that vanished, they would probably be in microorganisms, because if you're going to create species de novo from chemicals off the shelf, it would have to be that. But nobody in their right mind thinks that we're going to reconstitute the ancient faunas and floras of the world that way. We don't even know what's out there. How can we recreate anything resembling them? We don't know how they fit together. Ecology isn't far enough along to even think. It would be of how to put them together in any kind of a new ecosystem. It would be monstrous, in my opinion, to create organisms and species whose nature and complexity are limited by the nature and complexity of the human mind, and then expect that we can somehow fit those together to create new ecosystems. If I get your meaning right, it would be like unscrambling an egg with 2 spoons.
See, we can use the mic for recording purposes, please.
Yeah, can you? I can't hear you. Would you speak up?
Dr. Wilson, you gave a figure of about 50 billion for the potential to sort of save at least these hotspots, if I understood correctly.
Yeah.
And what about, in your opinion, what is the best way to use that money? Is it to make these areas specifically conservation areas and have them be sort of excluded from human contact?
Yeah.
Or is it to use that money in terms of development of the communities living there? Or is it to do research? I mean, one might argue that actually research into what species there are in, say, a spoon of soil, money to do that might be better spent on just protecting that environment as, say, the Nature Conservancy.
All of it. All of the above. We really ought to be financing the exploration of the living world. You know, the systematics, the genetic mapping, all of that should come from other sources. That should be mainline biology. And we now know enough from detailed studies of these hotspots and other critical areas that each one is unique to itself. And really what you must do, and there are organizations like RARE, headquartered in New York, is to literally inhabit those areas with the people and find out what it is they need, what they want, and how they can be helped, their economy can be helped in a way that would include stewardship in the things that they will do and become, and that would become part of their culture, or in many cases it would just simply continue to be part of the culture. We get a lot of destruction of natural environments by first destroying the culture of the people.
I wonder if you could say a word. I wonder if you could say a word in your conversations with religious people about the difference, perhaps, in the notion of time, and whether, for example, the idea of an apocalypse would change one's view about conservation, and how you then go about responding to that.
Yeah, that's a problem within the evangelical community. And I think there's going to be some division among the evangelicals, but it may not be quite as serious as it seems. The dispensationalists are a subgroup of evangelicals that Bill Moyer is always talking about. And they base, I've got so many theologians here, I might get dumped on, but they base notions of the apocalypse from the writings of the author of the Book of Revelation. My personal, slightly irreverent opinion would be that man needed treatment. But he did create these horrendous visions, you know, of apocalypse and blood and the rapture that would raise those who had declared faith in Jesus Christ, raised bodily to heaven, and the rest of us left behind for the millennium, at which time there would be the apocalypse, the great battle between Armageddon, rather, the great battle of the forces of Christ versus those of Satan. Christ would win, but who knows what would happen after that. And they believe, the dispensationalists, as have people throughout for 2,000 years and more, that it is upon us. And therefore, we would not, there's little point in taking care of the earth, because that's not what matters. It's upon us. We should save as many souls as we can. to go up with us. And that's sort of a dangerous attitude, but I don't think the majority of evangelicals, certainly not the ones I've dealt with, really buy that. They see the creation as part of their religious responsibility, taking care of it.
A comment and then a question. The comment on the last question. I had 2 students in class today, a class on ecological ethics, who mentioned that they grew up in that kind of a context, and one of them said as a child he used to have nightmares because if he woke up and he didn't find his parents, he thought they were raptured and he was left behind. And that was kind of very traumatic for him. In your book you mentioned bioblitzes. Are there any efforts to do that around here? Do you have any suggestions for doing that kind of activity to catalog species that you have a lot of volunteers doing it? So besides the money that would otherwise have to be expended, there's a lot of volunteer naturalists out there.
Professor Hart from BU, he was a theologian, I feared, my expert on environmental ethics. Bioblitzes are spreading around the world, incidentally, with 18 countries now holding them, and many states in the United States. This is an exercise in which people get together, experts, amateurs, just people who like to have a day of fun exploring to see how many species of plants and animals you can find in 24 hours. It has competitive aspects and so on. And the BioBlitz programs locally, I think you could find out best by checking through the Island Alliance, headquartered in Boston. It uses BioBlitzes in the harbor islands, and would know about other organized bioblitzes in the area.
Maybe the last question here.
Thank you. Professor Wilson, I'm a biologist, native of the Caribbean, and I have not encountered any problems with intellectual arguments for conservation, or as a humanist of like telling a religious guy why we conserve nature because it's the creation. But as soon as I speak politics and the real reason why the people in the Caribbean are poor and we're destroying the environment, and I speak about U.S. foreign policy, I'm no longer a scientist, and I'm like ostracized.
Now you're into
I'm
politics.
talking about communism or capitalism or whatever. So if what matters at the end is conserving the environment, when are we biologists allowed to speak about politics and the real reasons?
Yeah. Well. I know you personally, to be Sebastian, to be on the borderline and with that dilemma involved, and I just don't see why we've had discussions like this. I'm sure why you cannot be a political activist and a scientist gathering the information where what you have an interest in is the well-being of all the people. And, this is should be a non-ideological issue. But furthermore, the science is transparent. That's the nice thing about it, as you know. I mean, if you tell them that, what is the figure, that all but 3 of the 52 species of frogs in Haiti are on the brink of extinction, and that really is terrible, because it probably reflects, what's happening elsewhere in Haiti and parts of the Dominican Republic, then they can check that out. And if they decide, well, that doesn't matter to me, I'm not going to be interested in that, well, then they just might suffer at the polls. Thank you.
Let's thank the